everyone. Welcome to Writing Easy, the podcast that takes the act of writing, which can sometimes be not easy, and tries to make it less not easy. I'm one of your hosts, Mary Mascari.
And I'm your other host, Melissa Long.
Today we're going to talk about something that we've talked about before and we will talk about again, and that is perfectionism. And I think that is something that I think every writer struggles with this, and it's the thing that gets in your way probably more than anything else. And I have been rereading a book that I had talked about in the podcast before, but I'm reading it again, The 7 Secrets of the Prolific by Hillary Rettig. I'm actually rereading that book, and I'm taking really detailed notes, and so I kind of want to talk about perfectionism. See, look, and see, I make a mistake, I accept that, and I move on.
Oh, wow. It's revolutionary. Yeah.
It is. It so is. And Melissa, you said you struggle with this too, right?
I do. And it's funny. I never thought of myself as a perfectionist until I started focusing on my writing. Because there's something about the act of writing that you feel like, everybody tells you it has to be perfect in order for you to break in. But then also because you put it on the page and you come back to it and you edit it, it leaves room for obsessing in a way that a lot of other things in life don't give you that opportunity to do.
Yeah. Now, when you get perfectionism, does that block you, or it sounds like it more makes you just go into this cycle of editing and editing and editing?
It can block me too, because the idea in my head is perfect. So that first draft, is really difficult when it doesn't live up to the vision in my head.
And that's what's really scary. A couple of things that I saw in the book this time that really stuck out to me. One is that she talks about perfectionism as an addiction. And in fact, some of the things that she talks about overcoming perfectionism has a lot to do, similar to what people have to do to get over addiction, which I thought was an amazing concept.
Yeah, I've never thought of that.
But you can see how it's similar, right? It's this pretend satisfying thing that's ultimately very damaging to you. It's it's this thing you do that feels like it's the right thing to do, feels like it's good, right? But it's very damaging, and you have to rewrite your brain to really get over it.
Mm-hmm.
And let's also state right now that perfectionism is bad, right? We're agreeing on that?
I think yes. I don't see a way in which it's, what is perfectionism? The obsession with trying to make something to achieve an unattainable state, that is bad, right?
Yeah.
But having pride, taking pride and care in your work,
that's not perfectionism.
It's not perfectionism. That's trying to do your best version of, it's such a fine line, right? Because when do you cross over from I want this thing to be finished and professional and to represent the story and not be grammatically incorrect versus I need it to be perfect, but there is no definition of what perfect looks like.
I think when it gets in your way, that's probably when you know you've crossed that line, right? Where you can't sit down to write, you're throwing everything away, or you revise and revise and revise and revise, and you're not getting anywhere, or you start procrastinating is the other thing. I think is when it starts to get in your way. And when you start to get into this sort of damaging, angry pushing sort of thing, self-deprecating. And in fact, one of the things that is in this book, again, that I thought was really interesting was she listed out this thing called the Perfectionism's Toolkit. Mm-hmm. And I looked at that and I'm like, no, that's that list of cognitive distortions, right? There's kind of a semi, I don't know, official, it's not official, but there's this list of, here are the top 10 cognitive distortions. And there are things like all or nothing thinking, overgeneralizations, discounting the positive, fortune telling, emotional reasonings, should statements, labeling, personalization and blame. And that's what perfectionism is, right? So even though our culture has a really strong thing about, oh, now I'm a perfectionist, that means I demand the best, and you should demand the best of yourself, and you really kind of should be a perfectionist. It's kind of a, it's like being a workaholic. Well, that's a problem, but not really. No, right. Really. And so I think it's really interesting that that this thing that our society kind of lauds as a sign of self-discipline and a necessary step to success is actually hugely damaging from a mental health perspective, and often not based in reality at all.
I mean, it's interesting that you used that she used the word addiction and that you brought that up too, because I had this conversation with another writer friend about procrastination, and I am a very deadline driven person, and it has to be an external deadline. Like, if I give myself more time, I will take it. I will never finish. But the moment somebody else gives me a deadline, like, I obsess over it. But I can't make a lot of traction until I get close to that deadline, because there's something about, like, I just get more clarity and I get more zeroed in on what I'm trying to do with that deadline looming. And we were talking about the addiction to the adrenaline rush of, like, being in those final hours, and, like, that clarity that I get is, like, part of the reason why I procrastinate, because I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling that high yet. So it's like something might not be working, and I just avoid doing it. And then when I get that high, like, that's how I know it's clicking. But that only happens because of the, like, craziness to get to that deadline. And so it's like this self-fulfilling thing that, like, I always procrastinate because I need that deadline and that adrenaline rush. Like, I'm addicted to that feeling of clarity and excitement, knowing the deadline is looming, and then hitting it, and then being like, yeah, I hit it. It's good. And usually it's good, but sometimes it's not. But I'm like, yeah, I did it.
If it works for you, I'm not gonna criticize that if it works, man. Because for me, a deadline is terrifying. Is demotivating for me. I mean, like I have a due date, okay, but if, like, a looming deadline, that freezes me up. Like anything else.
Oh yeah. Like, a lot of people,
it's gotta be perfect,
right?
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people don't, and that's why, like, I wrote grants, and a lot of people don't do grants and fundraising because it is very hard deadline. A lot of people don't do news journalism. It's very, like, you have to have a certain personality to be in that kind of field. And yet, like, that is what I think, it's like this addiction to the adrenaline rush of like coming up to a deadline and, like, am I going to get it done in time? Which
now,
also, like, I feel like the perfectionism in me, like the perfectionist in me, starts to slack off a little bit when I get to that deadline, because I don't have time. Like, it just...
Well, and I can see that can be kind of freeing, though, right? Because you can shut that perfectionist up because you don't have time. And that's that might be kind of a coping mechanism to kind of get that voice out of your head because you don't have time. Whereas if you have all the time in the world, that's when the voices start coming in, and that can really kind of get into it.
And the doubt, and they're like, well, maybe we shouldn't do it this way.
Yeah, that's really cool. And actually, that's part of what she talks about is gentle deadlines to kind of, get that idea out of your head, but just to also recognize that that it's insidious, and it's everywhere, and it's part of the story we tell ourselves about success. But the reality is, it can really mess you up, and you have to find a way to let go of that myth, of that story that you're telling yourself, so that you can actually write. I mean, it's like, if you think about, like, an athlete who works out so hard they injure themselves, right? Like, that's what we're talking about. That's what this level of perfectionism is like, is to say, well, yeah, you have to work out to be in shape if you're an athlete. But if you work out so much you injure yourself and you keep working out, well, you can't do your sport. You can't do the thing because you're hurt. And I think that kind of happens, like I want to say, not to get too over dramatic, that kind of happens to our soul. Like, we injure our souls when we try to push ourselves in this way, when we use things like guilt and coercion and things like that to try to motivate ourselves. Like, you start to get blocked, you go, this sucks, this is the worst, how come you're not working harder, you should be doing better, right? That sort of aggressive demanding of yourself, and those cognitive distortions, this all or nothing thinking of, like, well, if you can't do this, you'll never do anything, or I know this isn't going to work, this fortune telling, I know it's not going to work, no one's ever going to buy this, no one's ever going to like this. Blaming yourself for something, like, you're a terrible writer because you're not writing right now. Like, all these cognitive distortions, these things where you take a grain of truth and blow it up, it feels like you're doing something, but you're not. It's actually, you're trying to protect yourself from facing your fears.
Exactly. And I think that self-deprecating nature, like I've seen that in so many professional writers, award-winning writers. I go to panels and I hear those writers sit on stage and also have that self-deprecating attitude about their work. And it's so bizarre to me how fixated we can become of this own internal narrative of the quality of our work, that we should be doing something else, it should be better, it wasn't this or that, when externally, like, we're telling ourselves, all these people are thinking this thing about me, and we're judging ourselves, but other people are looking at us with a different set of, like, they're like, I love this work, this is the greatest work ever, and they don't understand. And it can also be it can be a turnoff. Like, I find that if somebody's pitching to me, or somebody's sharing an idea or a project, or if I'm interviewing somebody, like, I don't want to hear them tell me all the reasons why their story is bad and they're not a great writer. I'm like, you are a great writer. Just stop saying that. Like, the work speaks for itself. I'm telling you it's good. Like, why don't you hear me when I say that this work is good?
It's hard because it's such a, it feels like you're being demanding of yourself, like you are asking more of yourself, you're recognizing the weaknesses of the things, and you have to find that balance. But yeah, you're right, the fear is very it's a lie, right? It's a lie. You know it's a lie. You've seen what this person has written, and they say they're a bad writer. You're like, no, that is a lie. Whatever's telling you that is not correct. And so you have to be always on your guard for that way of motivating yourself in a negative, fear-based way, because you can get to that same place without that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is writing. Like, writing is hard, right? It is, as we say all the time. Why not come to it from a place of joy and not worried about the results as much as the process, rather than, this isn't good enough yet, this isn't good enough yet, measuring it against the distance. Just, what are you doing right now? That the whole idea of Zen archery, right? We've all heard about that, where the idea is not the target, it's making sure you're pulling back the bow correctly. You know, you've got your form is that which is something you have control over, right? You know, being that yelly, screamy coach at yourself. You know, I know that the myth is that that's what it takes, but the reality is it isn't, particularly for creative work.
Yeah, in some instances, it's all about retraining the way you think, because our culture is very results oriented, you know, self-sufficiency, tough love, like no pain, no gain. And that spills into all of our creative endeavors. And it's easy for us to carry those over from our corporate jobs, or from, you know, sports, or from other things that it's just been messaged to us that this is how you work, learn, achieve, and find success. But so much of what I've learned in my writing journey is unpacking that, releasing that, and taking a completely different approach. Like, you're talking about Buddhism, you're talking about Zen, you're talking about all of these different ways of resetting what success looks like, what, like, patience, mindfulness, all of those things are, I think they're starting to be more discussed and focused on in our society, and people are sort of stepping back and being like, no, this is not the way I want to live my life, and it's not healthy, and I want more balance. But still, the norm is you work, you're self-deprecating, you, like, all the things you should be doing. How do you define success? It's through money, it's through titles, it's through X, Y, and Z. And that can come in.
Work harder.
Just work harder. If you just work harder
and more.
If you're not getting what you think, it's because you're not working hard enough, or you're not good enough.
Yeah.
Which is not the case.
and who wants to live like that? I mean, who wants to live like that? Like, art should be a place of joy. It should be a place to express yourself. It should be a place where it's a safe place, right? Where you can go and open your heart and deal with all the things that are going on within you, and try things, and explore, right? And discover. Like that's what the kind of space you need to create things in.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the kind of space you need to create human life, right? It's a happy, trusting place with lots of fun and joy, yeah? Art is the same way, so don't, it's not a factory, you're not on a rowing ship, you have to, I mean, yeah, you need some rigor, you need a practice, you need a to care about the quality of what you're doing. You have to, like a goal you're trying to reach with your thing. And, at one point you say, is this piece doing the thing I want it to do? But it doesn't come from a place of this sort of almost fetishized pain,
It's a tough one. I mean, it does require a lot of work. I think people assume that they'll just evolve into this kind of person who's like, oh, this no longer bothers me. And it's, we say it a lot that that it's hard, that you have to shift your mindset, that you have to, not beat yourself up over things. But it does take a lot of deliberate work and practice to get to that place where you're giving yourself that freedom to be in the moment and enjoy the process, because you're unlearning so much.
Yeah. And you just cultivate that space, that mindset, and keep at it.
Yeah. Keep at it. I always avoid the shoulds. That has become my big trigger.
It's like, such a swear word.
If I hear that, I'm like, wait, it causes me now to stop and say, like, what was that statement I just said? And like, why did I say should? And what does that mean? Because it usually means it's something I don't want to do, but I feel pressured to do by some external force or something. And so I'm like, ooh, why did I say that? Is that true?
Yeah. And then the guilt starts to come in, and that whole script just starts
just goes,
runs along. And you have to stop and examine that and say, okay, why am I saying should instead of want?
Or I am, or I will. Yeah.
Yeah. It's usually, oh, I should. And then the next word after that is but.
Yeah.
I should be doing this, but I don't have time for it. Well, do it or don't. And then if you don't, don't. Like,
and it's usually degrading to the thing that you're doing. It's like, oh, I'm watching TV, but I should be doing this. Well, just enjoy watching TV. Maybe you need a break. Maybe you need to find some inspiration. So oh, I should be doing this, but I'm reading a book, or I should be reading, but I'm writing. Well, you're writing, so just enjoy writing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, because it's never should be doing this thing that I'm doing.
Right. Yeah, I've never said that.
I should do this. Oh, and I am. Yay.
Oh, yay.
That's funny.
I love it.
All right. So we should stop. Oh, no. We will stop. We will wrap up here, but I know for a fact that we will be talking about perfectionism more and more in the future, because it's something that I think every writer deals with, and it's a big, scary monster that it can only be fought with love. Aw. All right. Anything else we need to talk about as we're wrapping up?
Give us a like.
Yes, please. Like, subscribe, review, rate, all those things. Please, please. And I guess we'll just see you guys next time. So remember, writing is hard.
So take it easy.
I'm Mary.
And I'm Melissa.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.